This is completing the square. This is the first worksheet on completing the square, and I'm going to do the last number on that page, on that first worksheet, because my high school algebra teacher used to say, if you can do the last one, you can do all of them. And there was a finger point that went with that. You don't see it because I'm not on video. But this is completing the square. So step one, completing the square. Whatever the constant term is, get it to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 19 from both sides. So that becomes x squared plus 8x equals minus 22. So step one, you can write these steps down. Step one, move the constant to the other side. Step two, take half of whatever the coefficient of the non-square term is. So in this case, that's 8x. X there isn't squared. Half of 8 is 4. Place it in parentheses with the variable and square it. X plus 4 squared. And then the next step is square whatever half of that coefficient of the non-square term is, square it, and add that to both sides. So negative 22 in this case plus 16 is negative 6. Now here's technically what's being done. You've got x squared plus 8x. I take half of 8 is 4 and I square it. And then if you factor this, x squared plus 8x plus 16, the factors of 16 that add up to 8 are 4 and 4. So this is x plus 4 squared. But as long as you remember afterwards to square that half of the coefficient of the non-square term and add it to the other side, you just put, before you square it, you just put it in parentheses with x. So that's what I've got here. Now, I'm going to square root both sides. Square root of a square is just the thing itself. Technically, it's plus or minus. You got to put the plus. A lot of times people put plus or minus after they take the square root, but really it belongs there before. So this is plus or minus. Now this is a square root of negative 6. There can't be a square root of negative 6. There's no square roots of negative numbers. That's imaginary. So whenever you have a square root of a negative number like negative 6, that equals I times the square root of the positive number. So plus or minus I square root of 6. I got rid of that square root of a negative by putting in I, the imaginary number. So that's technically, really it's negative, square root of negative 6 equals square root of negative 1 times square root of 6, and the square root of negative 1 is I. Now, a lot of times it's written, put the number before the I. Well, it doesn't matter. I like to put it before so that it's clear it's not under the square root sign. Most books and worksheets and solutions will put it after. Okay, you can also write it that way. Plus or minus square root of 6 times I. And make it very clear, and for some reason, that the I doesn't belong in the square root. Now, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 6 I. I can write those separately. Negative 4 plus square root of 6 I. Negative 4 minus square root of 6 I. Those are the two solutions. X equals. You can also write it like that. That is correct. That's the whole solution. But that's completing the square. I'll say it again. Write it down. Put it on a cheat sheet. Step 1. Move all constants to one side of the equation, the side opposite where your variables are. Step 2. Take half of the coefficient of the non-square term. Put it in parentheses with the variable and square it. Then square that 1/2 of the coefficient of the non-square term and add it to the other side. If it came out to minus 16, we'd add minus 16 to both sides. Whenever you have an equation, it's like a scale. If I add 16 to one side, which I technically did when I squared that half of 8, I have to add it to the other side. So add it to the other side. Then take the square root. That's this step. And then solve for the variable. So write those steps down. In this case, it's x equals -4 plus square root of 6i, -4 minus square root of 6i. Make sure it is very clear. Like mine right now isn't very clear. I'm going to have to clean this up. I want to make sure that it's very clear that only the 6 is inside the square root, not the I. So like that, negative square root of 6i, -4 minus square root of 6i, -4 plus square root of 6i. Be very careful so it's very clear. But that's it for that one.